Today on Cult Pop, I'm really pleased to have Mark Terry returning to the show. Mark's been on the show 3 or 4 times in the past talking about his Derek Stillwater novels, and today he's on to talk about a brand new thriller, Crystal Storm. So stay tuned for more Cult Pop. With me now is author Mark Terry. He's the author of Crystal Storm. Mark's going to look very familiar to you because he's been on the show 3 or 4 times. It's just been a couple years since we've had him on from the last time, so we're really happy to have you back on, Mark.
Great to be here.
I've always enjoyed your interviews, so I'm really pleased to have you. Always loved your books. And you've hit one out of the park here with Crystal Storm. Right now it's a standalone. I'll be asking questions about that later. But it's a thriller with some sci-fi horror elements. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to jump right in. Our protagonist, Doug Shepard's former military man, and he's called into action. He's living the life in Hawaii. He's had kind of a hard life, lost some people.
Right,
and then we
Doug or Shep
yeah.
He's a little bit adrift. He is a former Army researcher, MD, PhD, and for a variety of reasons has had a lot of lousy things happen to his life and not necessarily dealt with it terribly well. So he's hanging out in Hawaii, working a couple days at a clinic and basically working as a beach bum at a surf shop. And the military has come back and said, we need you, and you don't have a lot of choice in it. And about 2 days later finds himself in a secret military installation in Antarctica, where a lot of things are going wrong, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. But
now, I really love this book, and I love Antarctica has always been, from back in the day when I was a young person, and the remake of The Thing with Kurt Russell and all that, and then you read stuff. So it's a great setting because of the mystery and the allure of that whole area, mm-hmm. and how unforgiving it is and how scary it can be. So right off the top, you've got a great setting. Well, when we get up, when we get moving and get down, I guess I should say, down there, there's actually some science fiction and horror elements that are added, and that's not what we are used to with your stuff, and I really loved it. So let's talk as much as you can without, I don't want to ruin the book for anyone, but there's right from the get-go, some weird things are happening as soon as we get to the base.
Right, and when it comes to Antarctica too, when I was doing research there, Ross Island, which is where the McMurdo base is, has a live volcano, which I didn't actually know, Mount Erebus, and then so Camp Crystal is sort of set up between two volcanoes on the island, one of which is called Mount Terror. So it's, what a great name. You almost want to put a book there anyways. But yeah, it's the science. His background is a little bit in working with cold weather extremes, but also kind of odd things that go on in genetics. And I have a background in genetics. And so that was partly why he gets dragged down there, that combination, and he'd had previous experience in Antarctica. He immediately comes out where the military, the Army in particular, is saying, well, we can't tell you exactly what's going on. We want you to just focus on this one issue. And that doesn't last very long because things keep going wrong, and he's really not happy to be there and butting heads with his military commanders. He's been out of the military for about a decade and isn't really happy to be thrown back in, and is pushing back really hard. But the science is, it's not that out there. I mean, it's fringy, although, we're finding more and more about genetics and how unusual things happen and why they happen, and I really built on that.
Now, I wanted to kind of touch a little bit. It's a good time to bring this up. I was going to ask two things. First was going to be why Antarctica, and I'll explain why. But also I wanted to talk about the science, because in past discussions you and I had both on camera and off camera, you like to do your due diligence and kind of put the science and make it pretty plausible as opposed to just way out there. We talked about that with a lot of other books. So I wanted to ask you first, why Antarctica? Because after I read the book, I started researching more about Antarctica because I didn't know about it. I thought, was that just fiction? And the things you're mentioning. And then also the science stuff about it. What triggered you, why this topic? Because I think going to be kind of timely in the next genetics and things that can be done with that type of stuff, scientific manipulation when it comes to genes and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure. Well, first, Antarctica. I think I've just always been fascinated by Antarctica. It's and in terms of writing, particularly if you're going to write a kind of an adventure thing, it's cool to do these isolated areas. So Antarctica, maybe some desert, some jungle, and I just kind of wanted. I mean, I think a lot of it was like I'd really like to. Loved books and movies that took place in Antarctica, and it's a very isolated area. And the advantage of it, in a lot of ways, is because it's very internal, right? So once he's in this camp, which is under a geodesic dome, you're kind of stuck. And in this camp, they're like, you're only leaving with special permission. And then where can you go? I mean, now that's a big part of that book, is that even if everything is falling apart in the camp, what are you going to do? It's a very hostile environment outside. And that definitely plays a role in the book.
The environmental conditions you described, 45 below wind chill, and temperatures that cold, if not colder, and that they'd have to be in very special survival gear. And if they're not in that, they're done for within 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour. That kind of stuff really tells you how unforgiving that whole place is.
And it gives it a nice ticking clock kind of thing, because he got dragged down there just a couple weeks before winter's coming. And he knows this, and he's like, so we're going to fix this, and if we don't get this solution, whatever the problems that you brought me here for, we're likely to be stuck until the next summer, which is very common in Antarctica. A lot of cases, there have been a lot of cases where people have had medical problems, and they've had to do surgery kind of remotely and things. Simply because it's so cold that the planes can't land. They can't. The oil freezes up and all that sort of thing. So that gives it a ticking clock aspect, which is fun. It's remote. I mean, I think it's sort of the last frontier in many ways on Earth. That and maybe the bottom of the ocean, and who knows, that could come.
Now, I've told you this before, and I love the pacing of your books. I always have, and I think you write in a very cinematic way. When I read your novels, I can envision very easily what you're writing, and a movie starts in my head. And I specifically love the pacing where, with your books, they're pretty hard. Some books, well, this is a nice place to stop. I find myself often reading 2 or 3 or 4 more chapters than I intended to. Well, I can't stop now. I can't stop now. I can't stop now. You keep on going. So I think that's the ultimate compliment. When it comes to this book, it is the ultimate page turner, because at first you start to read and there's some things happen, and then it goes and it doesn't slow down. From the beginning until the end, that book doesn't slow down. And so I want to congratulate you on that. I want to talk, if we can, and it's not giving anything away, but it's listed right now as a standalone. But
sure.
I would love to see some of because there's a bunch of characters that we get to know, and I'd like to see a few in particular again. Is this somebody, are you getting feedback that you would maybe like to revisit some of these characters?
I think so. I mean, I would love to. I would love for it to be a series with Shepard, and I'm trying to decide whether I can say this. At least one of the other characters, for sure, that I would like to.
That's
to
why
see.
I say I don't want to mention it, because
I was going to say, well, there's some question as to who's going to survive throughout all this. So I've got several ideas. I am in the process of, like, essentially, if it became a series, it would be like my third, and so the Derek Stillwater novels. I've got one that I'm working on there, and I've got an Austin Davis novel that I'm working on that I expect will be out before the end of this year. So yes, I would love to write more with him, and I've got some cool notions and ideas, including one that involves pirate treasure that I would like to dig a little bit more into, and so we'll see.
Well, he is definitely a character, and there are other I would really like to see more of. But I'd like to segue over, and it's not, I could talk all day about the book, but I don't want to talk so much that we give people, well, there's no reason for me to go buy the book now. They told me everything, so I don't want to.
It's a tricky one for this, too.
Right.
I will say, in life and medicine, and there's this, it kind of comes up in the book, this kind of sense of catastrophic cascade where it's not just one thing going wrong, it's multiple things and one damn thing after another, and I really leaned on that with the book. So that helps with the pace too, where it's like there's a lot of things. There's this possible saboteur, and
Right.
there's just the science itself is a little bit of mad
And Shepard
scientist.
has one set of expertise, but he's also a doctor, so he ends up helping out in the medical situations that are going
yeah,
wrong.
he's
And
definitely
that's what-
they're definitely understaffed with healthcare professionals. Yeah.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the book. I think it's fantastic, and as I said, I'm hoping for more, so we'll
Well.
talk on that later. But I kind of wanted to segue into Stillwater, and
Okay.
that's kind of how Derek Stillwater is one of my favorite characters. I think it's a damn shame that I'm not seeing him in either a movie, Amazon, Netflix, or something. So tell me where we're at in the series with that. You were at least 8. I think you're 9 now. We've what, Dirty Blonde was the last?
Dirty
Is that
Blonde
right?
was the last one, and that was a not exactly a prequel. It's within the series. I'd written a couple prequels that picked up with Derek. Derek was he's changed throughout the series and what he does for a living. So he's a specialist in biological and chemical terrorism and warfare. So in the first book, he was a troubleshooter for Homeland Security. As we moved through the series, I took a couple looks back at when he came out of the military and went into the CIA briefly, and wrote a couple stories about those. And then, so Dirty Blonde, the last one, is actually kind of in the middle. It's a sequel. It originally was intended to be a sequel of another guy's book, if I can get into that.
Yeah.
Joe Conrath wrote a series of books and still is writing them. Joe's a great guy, and was doing a series of books featuring a Chicago detective named Jack Daniels. And so he had the opportunity for a lot of us to write books in that world. And I really liked a book of his called Dirty Martini, so I wrote a direct sequel to it. Well, that was through an Amazon program that doesn't exist anymore. So about a year ago, he was like, well, here's, what you can do. You can change her name, the character of his name.
Got it. Okay. Now that makes
or
sense.
you could, just rewrite everything. We tried to work out some things, and then that was kind of the best way to kind of go through and not do it with Jack Daniels. So Derek Stillwater was investigating basically a serial killer in Chicago. It started out as a serial killer, and then there was kind of the prequel is this person poisoned all these people, and Derek came in as Homeland Security and said, the problem is there's 3 people here that the poisoning's different. We think it's a copycat. And so that spins off that book.
Now, Vengeance chronologically is the last. So I don't think it's the last one you published. I think that's probably the 8th book, but that's the last book so far in the series where
Right, I think
we're wondering where he's at in his life at the end of that one.
Yeah. It's either that or Sins of the Father. Sins of the Father before. And I'm asking you to tell me about my own books.
Yeah, okay. I just know I've
So let's put it. I am working
so
on
that's
a
where
Derek
we-
Stillwater
okay.
book, and I'm planning it to come out sometime next year, 2020. And so at this point, like I said, he started out the guy gets around. He was working for Homeland Security. Then he kind of was on loan to the State Department for a couple books, and then in some flashback books, he was in the CIA. That never lasted very long. He didn't have good experiences with the Central Intelligence Agency. At the end of the last book, he and a former Homeland Security secretary were planning on opening a security company. So that's actually where I am with the next book. That he and Jim Johnson are running a company called Threat Assessment Incorporated, which would be the name of the book. And let's say there's a lot of multiple terrorism attacks around the world that seem to be on the oil industry, and some of them are their clients. And Derek gets involved with that, with some of his other characters. So
Now, through the years, we've had this conversation, and from the very first book, I thought, my God, this should be a movie. And now as we've progressed, and there had been feelers throughout, you kind of had taken your agents and talked. Are we anywhere near, is anything maybe happening with all the expansive now, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon?
yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Not as far as I know. Now, where that is the one of the novels in the middle called The Fallen.
Right.
They actually had a script written, and it got shopped around. It was being marketed by Vast Entertainment, and they kind of specialize in taking books and turning them into movies. And it got shopped around, and it ultimately didn't get picked up. I'm going to make a caveat here, and I don't want to get into trouble with this, is that if you've ever watched the movies with Gerard Butler,
yes,
boy, are they a lot.
That's what I thought.
Like The Fallen.
I didn't want to say that sort of thing. That's exactly what I thought. That boy, there's a lot of similar stuff going on.
Because around the same time that, or maybe a year or so after that book came out, there were a couple books. The Fallen is basically Die Hard at the G8 Summit, right? So the president is, and all the members of the G8 Summit, which just ended recently in the news, the terrorist group takes over the G8 Summit and basically says, if you don't meet our demands, we'll kill a world leader every hour. And Derek was actually undercover there for a specific reason, and so it's very Die Hard, him running around picking off the terrorists and things, and it would be a great movie, and it's got some flavor to some other things that were out there.
And Stillwater, sometimes we get some Michigan flavor once in a while in your books. Every once in a while, there's some stuff I like that.
Yeah,
I like
Serpent's Kiss takes place
in Michigan. Now, when we had talked 10 years ago now, maybe even more than that, and then over the years we've talked stuff, you had a specific actor in mind if Stillwater is going to make it to the big screen. Now you've got 10 books to choose from, so there's a whole section of his life. Are there different actors now that you're thinking, wow, maybe as a younger, this would be a good actor?
You must have seen my comment on my Facebook page. Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, I was like, oh, Chris Hemsworth would be really kind of cool in this role. And he needs a good franchise now, right?
Absolutely.
Being done with Thor and
Men in Black.
Men in Black apparently didn't do so well. Although I thought that would have been perfect for him. But anyways, I think he would be great. At one point or another, I mean, I guess the series has been around. I'm not exactly sure what year the first book came out, but it's been out a while now, and they're thinking, oh, Clooney would be great.
Right.
George Clooney would be great, although he doesn't do that type of movie very often. At one point, I think Vast was actually trying to see if they could interest Will Smith in it, which I thought he'd be really good in it. Some of these guys are starting to feel a little old.
That's what I was
saying.
I think Clooney, and that's why I brought it up. Originally, we had talked about Clooney, and I think he's just a little too old.
He and I are the same age,
right.
I think, or he might be a year older.
Right.
So he can still pull it off as younger. Maybe Keanu, he's the same age as I am.
Right.
That'd be awesome.
Wow, that would be nice. So I guess you've kind of told us where Stillwater's at. You're telling me about Crystal Storm. Let me know what's coming up specifically next, and then let's let the people at home know how they can learn more about you, how they can buy your books, that type of stuff.
Sure. I'm currently the lead project is features a character that I wrote one book about a number of years ago called that one was called Hot Money, and it features a character kind of different from my other people, Austin Davis, and Austin Davis is a political advisor, but he's a very specific kind of political advisor in Washington, D.C., which is basically he solves problems for politicians, or as I put it, he knows where the bodies are buried because he often buried them himself. And it's almost like a PI novel in a way. And so the one I'm working on, somewhat at the request of my brother loves the character and was like, oh, you've got to write this, because I'd said, I wrote about 100 pages and I'm kind of screwing around with other projects, and he's like, oh, finish it for my birthday. Well,
that's fantastic.
His birthday was last month, so that's not happening. But yes, Pete, it'll be out hopefully by the end of the year, and it's called Capital Secrets, and it actually does involve a terrorist attack, and Derek Stillwater does make more than a casual appearance in it. So I'm looking forward to that. It's a little different, but those are fun books. He's a very smart-ass, witty kind of guy, and I enjoy writing about him too. And then, like I said, I'm working on Threat Assessment Incorporated, and next year. I'm
2020
next
for
year.
both, probably.
Yeah, that's a very that Threat Assessment Incorporated is a very, very ambitious book, because I'm thinking of it as a sort of a 3-book arc. So if I do really dive in on that, I have ambitious plans for it.
Good.
And And like you said, I've discussed. My son is a writer himself, and he and I have discussed a little bit the pirate kind of area thing, because my son is very much son Ian Terry is very much I don't know if I want to go so far as to say authority, but he's definitely into pirate history, and we've batted some ideas around for this. So maybe I should get him to work on it with me, and we'll get it done earlier.
Sounds excellent. And how can people learn more about you, get the book?
Sure. I have a website, which is markterrybooks.com. And I also am very active on Facebook, overly active on Facebook, the Bermuda Triangle, lost productivity there. But and so I've got an author page there, and but the website will give you links to all the books, and even some other free stuff on it about short stories and interviews and things.
Okay, excellent. Mark, really appreciate you being on the show. I always enjoy our interviews. I love your books, and I wish you continued success.
Well, thank you very much.
I enjoy the hell out of your books, and just keep them coming, please.
All right.
Folks, I want you to stay tuned for more Cult Pop, but I want to remind you that all of our library of shows is available at the website, cultpop.com. Mark's been on the show numerous times, so you can catch some of his old episodes talking about some of the Stillwater books we were discussing. You can see more in-depth discussion about those books also. So stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Well, that wraps up another show, and we want to thank Mark for another fantastic visit with us here at Cult Pop, and we want to thank A to Z Cards and Comics. They were wonderful hosts and let us set up and shoot. They've done that on multiple occasions. We had a fantastic time at their store. You can learn about them online. And speaking of online, every episode we've ever done of Cult Pop is online. Visit the website at www.cultpop.com. Again, www.cultpop.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.